Hey everyone, welcome back to the After Sermon. I am here with Doug Miller. Thank you so much for coming upstairs to literally talk about the sermon you just preached.
Of course. Yeah. Glad to be here.
All right. So I've got a couple questions for you, but first, just give us a quick high-level view of kind of where you took the sermon.
Yeah. Well, as you all know, we're in the middle of this great series that we've called Follow, that we've been intentionally trying to carve some time to spend time with Jesus. And we're just talking about the why behind that in so many ways. And this week, I shared the story of Peter and his first interaction with Jesus when Jesus told him or asked him to come follow him. And there's a lot more details that were part of the story that oftentimes we miss. But really the heart behind this was, it's about proximity. And when Peter was with Jesus, he kept stacking these yeses that were kind of progressive in his story. And as he walked through this series of yeses, he ultimately gets to the place where he drops everything and says, I choose to follow you.
Okay. That's amazing. I love this idea of proximity, but it got me thinking, what if like proximity, so this closeness idea, this being close to Jesus, it transforms us, but it also can cost us.
Yeah.
And so what parts of our lives tend to resist being that close to someone? And how do we know when following Jesus is actually costing us something real versus just the window dressing of, oh, I'm following?
That's such a great question. I think the first thing it's always going to cost us is time. And it actually is the most precious thing that we have.
Sure.
We're not guaranteed tomorrow, and we live very busy lives where we have expectations and demands from people all around us. So I think for most of us, myself included, the first thing that is a sacrifice in that regard is that we make a decision to carve some time to be with him. That costs us something. Right. In spending time with Jesus, that means we're not spending time doing something else. And the enemy likes for us to feel like that's not possible, that our lives are too full, that there's too many other things going. I think there's other times where we know something's happened in our life and we might feel like, I don't know if I am in a place because of maybe it was a behavior, a habit, or I said something I shouldn't have said, or whatever. There's all kind of complex. We can do all kinds of things that make us feel inadequate to be in his presence.
Yeah.
And I love that the reality is for us, we need to know where that comes from. And that's our enemy who tells us, hey, Daniel, not today.
You're too messed up.
You're too messed up to go spend time with me. So I see there be a lot of factors that are part of the complexity of us creating space. But I also know if we'll form the habit, it gets easier. And what I talked about this weekend is my prayer is for myself and for our church that we would get to a place where we're almost addicted to our time with Jesus, where we know our day is different, our lives are different because we were with him.
Yeah. Okay. So then you're talking about this idea of like carving out time, which I think is super important. But I think also a lot of times people will talk about this balancing act of like real life and our spiritual lives and like, how do we kind of figure that out? But what we've been saying is all of life is spiritual. And so if that's the case, if all of life is spiritual, then what if following Jesus means to actually create this holy imbalance where I'm actually not trying to balance things, but I'm actually just in lockstep with where I need to be and spending like an inordinate amount of time with Jesus.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that can actually be part of our rhythm of life?
Yeah, I think it's getting to the point where being with Jesus isn't just about coming to church on the weekend or even just a couple of minutes in my day where I stop to, walk through the follow guide or spend time in my Bible and pray or whatever. But rather, it just becomes this ongoing narrative that we continue to rehearse over in our minds all throughout the day, inviting Jesus to be part of the normal life we live. And instead of saying, oh, good, I did my time with Jesus this morning, or check the box, I went to church this week. Instead, it's when I go to work, I know I'm bringing Jesus with me. He's there. And so when I have told you guys for a long time, one of my favorite prayers is that James 1:5. If anyone ever lacks wisdom, ask. That's a way to invite Jesus into my normal day.
Yeah.
He says, I'll give you wisdom. Well, why wouldn't I ask for that? So developing this rhythm of just sensitivity to the fact that I need to, he's already there. We know he's omnipresent. He's everywhere. Right. But just living aware to his presence enough to say, why wouldn't I invite Jesus into this challenge that I'm facing with a loved one in conversation, or this split second decision that I need to make with my children, or this difficulty at work. Why wouldn't I just, or I see a beautiful sunrise or sunset and I'm like, that's God.
Yeah.
I see it there. To look at the mountains that are around us and just to the colors of the leaves right now, whatever it is, just making sure that these things become reminders of God's presence that is there in our everyday normal life.
I love that. I love that every day there is something, every minute there is something that points back to God. And I love that.
We used to do this thing with our kids. Like, hey, where did you see a God sighting today?
Yeah.
And just kind of to create a habit in our kids and honestly to remind us as parents, pay attention. Look where he's at. It could be in a word of encouragement someone gave you at school, or it could be, whatever, just to pay attention. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the next question that, I think that even like right now, like, I feel like I've been putting in the time, I've been carving out time, looking at life as all spiritual, every part of my life is spiritual. And then sometimes we are doing these things and we're making the effort, and yet it doesn't necessarily produce results or like tangible results. What would you say to someone in that season where they're like, you know what, Doug, I'm doing the things. I feel like I'm in the right headspace. I'm giving all of my life, to God in a spiritual sense, but I just don't feel any different.
It reminds me of when our parents would come to our house and they would help us put the kids to bed, and they would come back downstairs and be like, the kids are getting so big. Well, what was happening right under my nose was the kids were getting big. And because I didn't see the vast jump, because it was part of my everyday life, it was more obvious to them than to me. And I think this is true in our lives spiritually too. As we keep stacking yeses, like we talked about this week, and this time with Jesus, it's not like this flashbot big, like, the lights and the show and the camera and, I'm a new person, right. But it's rather this small kind of slow progression. There are days when you're going to take big steps and all of a sudden there's this epiphany and your nearness to God has sparked something in you and you're going to be changed from it. But I would say from my experience and the experience of many that I've worked with over the years doing this a long time, it's less obvious day after day after day. It's actually doing that with consistency that we make our greatest strides. So I think that's where we begin to see the difference. And another thing I do is I journal a lot. Yeah. So that gives me a chance to look back and see where I've come from.
Oh, that's cool.
And then this is big too. We got to do this in community. Because sometimes you'll see it in me faster than I'll see it in me. And so to have someone to kind of be speaking the process and what they're seeing is happening in me, I think that's beautiful. That's why God wants us to live in community. We're not meant to do this in isolation.
Absolutely.
And so as those progressive moments, so to speak, in our spiritual lives are happening, it's fun to have other people on the journey with you, because we can start, hey, Daniel, look what I see in your life. Yeah. This is awesome. And for you to say the same about me. And so sometimes it's just hard for us to see it in ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that thought. And I think it's important to talk about, especially as we're in this season going through our follow guides, because, it's like, I'm setting aside my time. I'm doing this. I'm doing the steps in a way. And, but to not give up because there hasn't been that like moment. Yeah. No, I love that. Okay. One last question. Yeah. Peter's story, you taught his like first yes was letting Jesus kind of borrow his boat.
Yeah.
What is, we live in Colorado, we're a bit landlocked. What does that look like for us in like 2025?
So what's the metaphorical boat? What I really wanted to communicate was less about the boat and more about Jesus making this move towards him and Peter allowing Jesus to be part of his life.
Yeah.
And so for us, in our lives today, as we think about what it looks like to be formed, it's about knowing that Jesus is making this move towards us. He did that from the beginning. He came and he died for us. So what does that look like today for me to say, I'm not going to, as we've already talked about, just compartmentalize this thing, but I'm going to try and live more aware of the fact that he wants to be in the middle of my everyday. So it could be in your car where all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going to turn sports radio off and I'm going to just be quiet and I'm going to pray maybe, or whatever. There's lots of little ways that we can do this. Just breathing. I know people, and I think it was Brother Lawrence that did this. He talked about this in his book, that we just breathe the name of Jesus all throughout the day. And so when you start getting off course, we used to set our alarms for 1 o'clock to pray, same kind of thing. How do we just have these constant reminders throughout our day? So it's not so much that we need to go buy a boat, but if you do, I'd love to go on the lake with you. It's more about this invitation into the everyday, simple little moments that we have with him where we're just living aware in a different kind of way.
I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to just dive deeper into your message. We really appreciate it.
You bet, man.
All right. If you want to watch the sermon that this entire conversation was based on, you can head to our YouTube channel, or you can head to any podcast platform that you may use and download the podcast there. Appreciate it.
Have a great week.